Ghost in the Shell, directed by Rupert Sanders, and is the live adaptation of the Japanese anime of the same name, you know, the 1995 version, which I only seen myself for the first time about 2 weeks ago, which I also did a review for. So for those of you that watched that video, my review of the 1995 original, you would know that I was pretty impressed with that movie. So this version, the live adaptation, is based in the future like the original, and you've got Major, who's played by Scarlett Johansson, and she's the first of her kind. A human who is cyber enhanced, you could say, in a way. The brain remains, but the body is completely cyborg and cybernetic, you could say. And she's created as a weapon to be this perfect soldier to fight against criminals and terrorists. But then you've got the villain of the piece, the antagonist, which is hacking into people's minds, and she's pretty much sent to investigate this and to stop whoever it is that's doing it. And as a result, she ends up discovering that she's actually been lied to, and her life, where she thinks was saved, instead it was stolen. So the plot slightly differs from the original movie. They did change it very slightly. They changed the plot slightly, and in this particular version, it reminded me a little bit of RoboCop, especially one of the first scenes in the film. Before I dive into my opinions and my thoughts of this film, I want to say that this review will contain very minor spoilers. So just to warn you, if you haven't seen the original and you haven't seen this version yet and you don't want to be spoiled, they're not really major spoilers. I wouldn't regard them as being anyway, but there will be very sort of minor spoilers in this review. So, the film. The live adaptation, like the original, is visually stunning. They pretty much nailed the look and feel of the 1995 movie and its world. The cinematography was beautiful. This was a glorious film to look at, and they did a great job at crafting and bringing this future world to life. Visually, the film was a treat for the eyes, and I loved the production design in this movie. The production design was stunning, from the sets, which blended in very well with the large amount of pretty good CGI. You know, the combination of both was very seamless. To the very cool costumes and props, I really dug the overall look of this film. They also replicated a lot of the iconic moments and scenes from the original anime, which I liked, and usually I'm against remakes or adaptations completely duplicating the previous work that is based on, and that it almost becomes a clone of that original movie with nothing added to make the movie better or different, you know. And if you're going to do a remake, add more layers and depth to its characters and scenes and moments. And in this, they did just that. They did, I feel, add a lot more depth to some of the characters, especially Major, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later on in the review. But yeah, in this, they did replicate those scenes, those iconic moments, but it's all done with a slightly different twist. You know, they subtly changed the plot, which as a result changed the reasoning and context to certain scenes. So certain moments would play out slightly different. This mostly being down to the writers changing the original story ever so slightly. But this leads me into my first gripe, my first complaint. By changing certain aspects of the original story resulted in this film being dumbed down quite a bit, something that I was afraid they might actually do. This live adaptation is watered down and made more digestible, or commercial even, resulting in a pretty bland, one-dimensional villain antagonist, and with a plot that I felt was less blurry and confusing and complex. This version was more simple, as in you got the good guy and the bad guy, and a much more clearer path in which the story is going, whereas the original was a little more blurry and it required you to think a little more. This movie actually took away what I really liked with the original, which was the antagonist, the puppet master. The antagonists are slightly different. I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to reveal too much, but they are slightly different from this version to the original, and it's replaced with something or someone else, and I wish they hadn't. By doing so, they removed the psychological element and the deep questions that the original asked, about life and why, we existence, and all the philosophical questions and themes the original had was sort of really dumbed down as a result of certain things within the plot in this version being changed. But going back to what I said earlier on about how I feel remakes should add something new to the story. I feel like in this they did add elements to the plot that also improved on the original. There's a scene in which Major goes and meets up with this character. To me, I think she came across as a sort of a prostitute. But she meets up with this character purely out of curiosity for life, and you see she's trying to work out her existence and meaning of life. And I felt like it added a lot more weight and depth to the character and story. It was quite a nice scene, in fact, but it was very similar to a moment that was in the original where she's there staring at the skyscrapers of society, and she's staring at the mannequins in the shop front window, and you can see she's trying to work out her existence and the meaning of being here. But in this, I felt like it was done a little bit better. I liked that they added a bit of backstory to the major character, played beautifully by Scarlett Johansson, by the way. She was great as this character. She gave a really solid performance, and I think she did a good job at bringing this character to life. By adding more of a backstory as well, I felt it added more depth and emotion to the character. Something Johansson also brought to the character very well, that being emotion, which is pretty good going considering she's playing a character that's mostly cyborg. She did bring a lot of emotion and realism to the role. I loved how she moved as well, how she would turn her head and all of that, and she had this she walked almost robotic as well, and I really liked that. All those little things that help you believe in the character and his existence. I think she did a great job overall at portraying this character. But I really did like the fact that they added a backstory to this character, and how she really got there to this place that she's at the moment this film begins, because in the original there wasn't a lot to the character. You didn't really know a lot about her, and I feel like a lot more could have been added to flesh that character out, and they did that in this movie. They improved on this character by fleshing it out and giving this character more depth and emotion, I felt. The action in the movie was also very well done and shot. There's not a massive amount of action in the movie, but when you do get it, it's done very well and it's very entertaining. Like it doesn't go on forever and ever like they did with The Matrix, but when you get it, it's very satisfying and it is very entertaining. The music, now I loved the score in this film. I'm a big fan of Clint Mansell, and I adored what he created and composed here for Ghost in the Shell. It was beautiful. We had a perfect blend of elements from the original score within his own score, and it was simply beautiful. Especially during the opening scene, you don't get that iconic score which you get from the original, which I believe was Making a Cyborg. I think that's what it was called, with that sort of choir, that religious sort of choir going on. You don't get it in this version. You get it during the end though, which I thought was great. But Clint Mansell sort of created his own sort of score for the opening, and it was beautiful. I really, really liked it. But his score also contained elements of the original as well throughout the film, and I thought it was a very nice blend of both. I think he did a great job with the score for this film. But yeah, the opening scene, it's one of those scenes in which they almost 100% replicated from the original movie. But with this, they added very subtle additions and changes, and I thought it was very well done and it looked gorgeous. I have to mention the tank scene, so warning, mild spoilers for those that have not seen the original and do not want to be spoilt. But I loved how this scene played out here, and it's slightly different to how it played out in the original. But it was very tense, I felt, very dramatic, and I loved it. And they kept that iconic moment where the Major tries to rip open the opening of the tank, and I was afraid most of this scene would be changed. And even though the scene played out slightly different, the context, the circumstances of the scene differs slightly. It's still the same scene pretty much, and I just thought they did a great job at bringing this moment alive, and it was also quite emotional, mainly because of the performance of Johansson as well. So before I give my verdict, I've just got another minor little gripe, and that is I wish they'd made this movie a little more R-rated, a little more grittier and brutal like the 1995 classic. I felt like the film needed it, but that's just a minor gripe for me. Overall, this was a very well crafted movie. Technically, it was pretty well done, and I was pretty impressed with it. You know, it's a visual treat. The production design and score I adored. It's a very well directed movie. I just wish they hadn't watered down the plot and made it more digestible or commercial, you could say. I think they really did take away the deep sort of messages and, you know, those philosophical messages, which still remain slightly in this, but it's not as intense in this movie as it was in the original. But overall, for what this was, it was a well-crafted movie. They just simplified the plot to a point where I thought we've seen this before almost. Maybe that's just me. And I will be giving the 2017 Ghost in the Shell an A-. So yeah, not quite as good as the original, but I didn't quite think I'd rate this as high or as close to the original either. But yeah, they are my views and thoughts of the live adaptation of Ghost in the Shell. What did you guys think? Let me know below. And if you like what you see and you share the same passion, then why not hit subscribe?